In a year of underwhelming spin-offs and reboots, Fionna and Cake has been more than a pleasant surprise. It has easily become one of the best animated things that has happened this year. Though perhaps not that surprising given Adventure Time entries have nearly all been exceptional and are constantly evolving, as Fionna and Cake itself is completely its own thing with its own themes, in both senses. And if anyone was able to squeeze that last drop of genuine charm to be had out of multiverse stories, before we hopefully put a lid on the whole genre for about, 5 years, it would be Adventure Time. Stemming from Adventure Time's established multiverse premise of Prismo creating alternate realities out of people's wishes, as Fionna and Cake themselves were created not of the Ice King's Roll 63 fanfiction, but Prismo's accidental fanfiction. And on brand, Adventure Time took that premise and twisted it into a story of letting go of the past, the torments of identity, and the delusions of fantasies. But what's with all these references to the theme to Cheers? Well, dominantly because its lyrics are very thematically fitting.
Do, 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 do. Making your way in the world today takes everything you got.
When we first see Fionna and Cake, they aren't in their own ooh having adventures like the last times we've seen them. They are seemingly in a modernized, unmagical, mundane city, where Cake is just a regular cat and Fionna is jumping from mundane job to support herself. Bored out of their mind, they both dream of living in a more exciting and magical world. For some reason.
Wouldn't you like to get away?
Across the multiverse, Simon also thinks that his only chance at happiness is something outside of the realm of his reality. Simon has already tried everything to bring back the love of his life, and it has all failed. Now all he has is a repetitive existence as the only 20th century man in what is basically the year 3000, making this already a vastly superior Futurama reboot. You know, it occurs to me that Simon never asked to live in Fionna and Cake's normal world based on the world that he used to live in. On the surface, it seems like they both could have gotten what they wanted if they had merely switched places. But that's kind of the whole point, on the surface. Now, the Cheers theme has long since been established to be very important to Simon, as he sings its theme both to cheer up Marceline and to retain his own identity against the crown's madness.
Where everybody knows your name. Where everybody...
Then in a more literal sense, Simon is using that theme to trap himself in the past. He plays that song on repeat in the background of his literal living museum exhibit of the 20th century, showing how Simon not just hasn't moved on, but is refusing to move on.
Just move forward, Simon. Well, maybe I don't want to move forward. Maybe I just want to sit right here.
I also think there's significance that Cheers is a show about a bar, a place where everyone escapes to because life is too hard, as Fionna and Simon's preoccupations of the past can be read as addictions. Tell me that ice powers and wanting to be happy and mindless isn't a drug. There's even the theory that Cheers itself is actually a delusion of being this hilarious magical place and not the sad reality of spending all of your free time at a bar.
Everything drunks would like to believe about their lives is true inside of Cheers. They only get funnier and easier to be around the more they drink.
Where Everybody Knows Your Name is usually the most well-known lyric, and significant here as the titles of each episode are character names, in one way or another. The first four introduce our core characters. Destiny refers to little Destiny, who defies the identity that her father wants for her to be with Finn's son, the man who is known as the Winter King. The Star is at least what PB calls Marceline, and Jerry is what BMO calls the Lich. Then Casper and Nova are characters in a book who are really just stand-ins for Simon and Betty as Simon reevaluates their relationship. And in at least half of these names are ones designated by other people, reflecting how they see said character regardless of whether it actually fits, which is significant because this is what has really been torturing Simon.
No ice!
Because for his Cheers, this bar is not where everyone knows his name. Everyone who lives in Ooh knows him more as the Ice King than as Simon. They keep talking about all of the things that Ice King did. No one knows Simon or cares about anything that he cares about.
He used to be a really cool ice wizard who wrote my favorite book series, but then his girlfriend or fiance or something did something bonkers and turned him into a boring sad guy.
And this isn't just the fact that Ice King is an insane princess kidnapping mind curse that he endured for 1,000 years. Ice King is the reason that Betty is gone. Even without the crown, Ice King is still haunting him. But it's fair that this isn't just a matter of accidental peer pressure. The reason he succumbed to the crown in the first place was because of its power, because Simon himself felt too powerless to help anyone. So when he learns about Fionna and Cake's situation, he makes the resolution to turn back into Ice King officially to save their world, just because it gives him a sense of purpose, but also because it seems like the universe is telling him which identity to embrace. That is messed up on so many levels. This is Simon succumbing to his deluded senses of escapism, retreating from his life into a persona that he thinks will be easier. Even though it's incredibly sad, I love not giving a shit Simon. The moment he sees that Fionna and Cake, the series that has given him so much grief, is actually real and then just drinks, oh, I felt that. I felt that so hard.
Everybody knows our name.
Except that both being Ice King and his relationship with Betty were not as he pictured them. Ice King wasn't some happy-go-lucky dum-dum, he was sad and tormented in his own way, and his relationship was not as idealized as he remembered. This is also erasing the good parts of his past. His bond with Marceline literally made a world of difference. Literally, we see the world where he didn't find her. So it's not even reasonable for Simon to be using that relationship as his measuring stick for future happiness, because it only would prove that Simon hasn't grown or learned anything. And of course, Fionna is also being enticed by an alternate version of herself. She sees evidence of herself as a badass warrior, and fresh off the high, off of beating up a crowd of Beauty and the Beast rejects with the collective muscle power of Q-tips, and suddenly she's like, yes, this is what I want my life to be. This is what I was made to do. Which, she is technically right, except she doesn't actually have any fighting skills, or know literally anything about the worlds that she beams into.
I've played a lot of post-apocalyptic RPGs.
As a result, the next world she goes into, when she's up against somebody that can actually fight back, she gets her ass kicked.
Hit my heart!
It's a lot harder in real life.
And then in Best World, she's given what she thinks is the ultimate live-in video game fantasy. She's given a power-up, a bunch of supposedly disposable minions to destroy,
Then you should know by now I have zero impulse control when it comes to sugary food.
and a mission by a hot monarch. Except, whoops, he was the bad guy.
But I do feel kind of vindicated.
And Fionna just murdered a whole bunch of sentient beings. Like Simon's memory coping didn't hold up when it was considered from another perspective, like every Wish reality, the fantasy falls apart because other people's autonomy exists. Your actions and motives affect others, but also others' actions and motives affect you. People who have the equivalent of a superpower fantasy, sometimes it is just a power fantasy. It's an excuse to do whatever you want, including hurt people, and no one has the power to stop you. But clearly, that's not Fionna. If it was just that, then she would not be bothered by the fact that the candy people were innocent. Ultimately, Fionna does care about making a positive difference. She cares about having a purpose. And then in the next world, a bunch of their allies get killed. Yeah, I never thought we'd be sad to see the death of Finn's dad either. The fantasy illusion has been dashed. And there are probably few things in the world that are as horrifying as the thing that used to give you hope and comfort turning on you. This wasn't just Fionna's dream, this is literally the reason that she was created. She's supposed to be Fionna from Fionna and Cake.
Where everybody knows your name.
And she can't do it. In fact, by the end of it, Fionna has more or less become completely traumatized by magic, to the point where she's opting to let their world blink out of existence, rather than to interfere with magic at the potential costs, including sacrificing Simon. But obviously, Cake disagrees with this. Ah yes, the character everyone keeps forgetting is technically a co-protagonist, and there's a very obvious reason for that. Cake is a mega amorphous powered super cat. She used to be an ordinary house cat who didn't even have the ability to feed herself, let alone talk. Simon and Fionna may use the illusion of magic as coping mechanisms to make themselves feel more powerful in a world where they aren't, but for Cake, it's actually true. But Cake isn't retreating from anything. This is as much power and control over her life as she has ever had.
Back to your regular size, huh?
Yes, but I like having options.
But like every other power fantasy, it does go a bit to her head. That first-person player wish hubris. And she shuts out how scary and dangerous this is for everyone else. And it's why she's not worried about magic coming and changing everything, because she probably thinks if anything bad happens, she will have the power to handle it. But eventually she is also proven wrong because she is not powerful enough to stop the scarab. But it's not just that Fionna doesn't have powers, because OG Fionna doesn't have powers. OG Fionna doesn't have powers. But what they do have is knowledge of the world that they are in. They are resourceful. But there is little Fionna can do in a world that she knows nothing about. It's why she was also able to be so easily manipulated. It's why Simon comes off looking kinda like a badass by the end, because as much as he thought he couldn't help anyone without becoming the Ice King, he does actually, know this world. So at least he's had a decent idea of how to handle what came at them. And he proved capable enough that Fionna's lasting impression of him,
Simon can do anything.
that's really sweet. But not really. He's not really more skilled than you, he just lived here, but he was able to be a great guide and comfort. I really did love the bond between them in this series. And it's okay that Cake doesn't know anything about this world because Cake can literally adapt to unseen obstacles. Fionna's got nothing. But that has been a very important part of Fionna's growth, to acknowledge the reality in front of her in terms of what she can and can't do and the consequences of her actions. But it's only after getting beaten down to her core essence.
I think Gulb is digesting us, breaking us apart layer by layer down to our essential forms.
With no abilities but also no distractions or sense of safety, and facing the literal end of the world, that Fionna really has to find who she really is. Even with 5 minutes of existence left, she is going to do the best that she can. I mean, putting the scarab in jars at least kinda worked. Thanks, Ellis. And in the end, she is still basically classic Fionna. She is defending the world that she lives in and her friends. I know it's a cliche, but resilience really is a great power, because especially if you keep your options open, the tide can always turn, for completely random or even silly reasons. And finally, we get to see a less dramatic and healthier replay of similar arcs in Gary and Marshall Lee. Kind of. As they... Okay, maybe I missed this because this is already an old joke, but I didn't really know why PB's 63 self is named Gary. Is it because Gary Marshall, the romantic comedy guy, is that why? Because that's so dumb. Either way, like the others, Gary has a very specific vision on what it will take to make his dream of a candy kingdom come true. And it primarily involves perfecting his pastry formula. Except that he's never satisfied with it, so he's constantly tweaking it, and until he's satisfied, he doesn't plan to present it to a potential investor. So Gary is also stuck in his own repetitive head cycle, where unintervened he is unwilling to move forward. And suddenly, Marshall is dropped into his life, who might as well be magic. He loves his creations, he's completely into him, and he just happens to have the connections to the investors that Gary was looking for, and preemptively sets up a meeting before Gary is ready. The meeting does not go ideally, but not because Gary's formula wasn't ready. They were fine with the taste, the lemon carbs didn't like his character concept, so no matter how long Gary wasted on the formula, it would not have helped. Still, Marshall's connections does put him in the vicinity of other investors, but then realizes that these were favors that Marshall pulled in return for going back under his mother's thumb. And Gary decides that it's not worth it. Marshall's freedom and happiness is more important than, in reality, something that is not even his dream. It's just a lucky break. If Gary had stayed laser-focused merely on his 64-point plan, he wouldn't have been able to find this other great joy in his life. And it didn't come at the cost of his dream. His dream is still there, just now his life has this other great source of happiness. So in the end, why is Cheers the name of the finale when it seems like up till now, Cheers was treated as the symbol for the escapism from reality that needed to be avoided? Even for the characters in show, Cheers was the place they kept ending up every day because life sucked, or even when their dreams fell through. And that, I actually think, is the point. Just because they didn't get the fantastical, idealized life that they wanted, it doesn't mean that their lives aren't worth living. Cheers can be seen as both the self-indulgent reality-denying escapism, but also just a place that everyday people go to sometimes. Their lives keep going, and they can be repetitive and hard, but there is still happiness to be found in them. I mean, is the ultimate message to never go in bars, never play video games, never dream, never wish about anything more than what you already have? I mean, I do think there is something about appreciating the world in front of you. Fionna may want to play in Apocalypse Land for a day out of boredom, but for people who actually live in apocalypses, her world is the true fantasy. But clearly, not always. Escapism is bad when you trap yourself there at the expense of everything else. The difference is that Fionna and Simon needed to break out of their depressed cycles of longing and complaining and really open up to their world and, more importantly, the people around them for change to actually happen. At the beginning, they were both closed off, even when interacting with others and to other experiences and possibilities outside of what they already decided was the only way they were going to be happy. Now Simon, back in OO, is much more openly interacting with others and trying new things, and is considering moving out of his shrine to the past. And Fionna is fighting for the life that she wants, just in a way that works for the universe she's in, and not just for others, but with others. I am absolutely satisfied with this series, and I am perfectly fine with it being a set 10 episodes with no continuation. Though if it does become a massive hit and they come up with a season 2, I won't say no, because Adventure Time almost always comes out with something great. I am constantly in awe how Adventure Time just keeps building its world, keeping mostly consistent with its kitchen sink lore, but also keeps feeling fresh by aging with its fan base, how all of its songs just keep being bangers, and I really love how we finally got a season with just Simon being Simon. I love that we got a grown-up Finn, but perhaps more than anything else, even though this is already widely agreed upon, that Winter King is easily the best episode of the season, by a lot, for so many reasons. Between the music, and Marshall and Gary, and the reveal, and what just happened. Like, if I am ranking everything that I have watched this year, it's basically Spider-Verse, Winter King, the Lower Decks Strange World crossover, the Owl House finale, and then everything else. And oh, that delicious Adventure Time nightmare fuel, just in time for October. So tell me, Animaniacs, what did you guys think of Fionna and Cake? And what have your been favorite animated works this year, Animaniacs? And will Disney's take on Wishes later this year be anywhere close to being this interesting and nuanced?
Look out into the future and set our sights somewhere we are bound. You know the love that you put out. Oh, you know that love comes back around. You know the love that you put out. Oh, you know that love comes back around. See, and in the end, share the bounty with a friend. Even if you're wayward bound, the love comes back around. You know the love